The following announcement has been paid for by the NWO.
You know something, brother? Once upon a time, there was one of the greatest heel factions in all of wrestling. And it was all kicked off by one of the greatest heel turns in all of wrestling. They ran to WCW, and it was all too sweet.
Hulk Hogan turning heel and joining up with the Outsiders Scott Hall and Kevin Nash is one of, if not the, most successful angles in all of wrestling history. Not only was it beloved by many fans, but it was also highly profitable and has definitely stood the test of time. And the origins of this amazing stable is almost every bit as captivating as the group itself. Originally, Eric Bischoff was inspired by the Union of Wrestling Forces International Invasion angle with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, there would be some who'd say that inspired is just a little too generous of a term and that stealing is a little bit more accurate, but I definitely won't go that far, especially since Japan would eventually get their very own official chapter of the NWO. And while I'll totally admit that the concept was very similar to the UWFI invasion angle, the NWO did have a few unique factors and did things in a much different way, which is why I think that inspired is definitely the more accurate term. And one of the most particular points of inspiration for Eric Bischoff was when he attended New Japan's Battle Formation show, which was held on April 29th in 1996. Now, while the UWFI feud was heading towards its end, this show in some ways would be the beginning for the NWO, because it was very shortly after this event that Scott Hall would officially debut for WCW. Well, re-debut. He actually had been with the company prior. But anyway, Scott Hall's return was one of the most well-crafted plots in all of wrestling, marking the NWO for greatness right from the beginning. And just one example of the initial attention to detail that the NWO would receive was exactly how Scott Hall would make his appearance on TV. Hall should come in through the crowd and interrupt the match like he's not supposed to be there. And when he got to the ring, he shouldn't even beat anybody up. Not just yet. Instead, he should just walk right in during the middle of a match and simply say, "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." By the way, the match he interrupted was the Mauler, the former Blake Beverly of the Beverly Brothers, versus Steve Dahl. I just kind of feel bad for them, so I thought I'd give them a little shout out. Anyway, behind the scenes, Scott Hall's return to WCW also marked guaranteed contracts and wrestlers getting paid huge amounts of money for coming to WCW. And of course, the next big name wrestler to do so was Kevin Nash soon thereafter. Oh, and furthermore, the huge paychecks were also behind the idea of the paid announcements of the NWO. The idea being that they were so rich that they were actually able to buy WCW airtime and that they still weren't officially part of the company. Now, if you ask me, one of the major brilliances of this angle was that it wasn't insulting to the audience's intelligence. We know they're Razor Ramon and Diesel, and this allowed them to carry a lot of that momentum from the WWF over with them right into WCW. And it also allowed us to know that WCW was totally copying to hiring WWF guys, which was surprising during a time when top companies didn't really acknowledge their own competition. And all of this really helped to make the NWO great, by WCW making a storyline out of being invaded by the WWF, which to a lot of fans seemed like exactly what was happening. And as far as I'm concerned, straying from this initial concept is really what ultimately led to the group's failure. Oh, and to further add on the idea of these rogues encroaching on WCW's turf, the duo Hall and Nash would get the name The Outsiders, from none other than Mean Gene Okerlund. Which does bring up another point. The group was great because, while yes, some parties did contribute more than others, this was truly a labor of love from many, many different minds behind the scenes. For example, an unsung hero of WCW was Craig Leathers, director and producer for WCW programming. He's the one who actually came up with the famous NWO logo design. It's been said that he came up with the logo almost instantly in order to get t-shirts made as soon as possible to distribute to the public. And of course, we are just getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because the Outsiders were just the Outsiders. They didn't become the NWO until Hulk Hogan joined the team. Because it was on July 7th, 1996 at Daytona Beach, Florida, that the face of wrestling would change forever. Hulk Hogan, arguably the biggest babyface of all time, would turn on WCW and his own fans. The main event of the pay-per-view would feature Sting, Randy Savage, and Lex Luger, who all ironically became NWO members later on down the line, going against the team of Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and a mystery partner. Now, what was really interesting here about Hogan joining was that there were a lot of factors going into this heel turn. Since March of that year, Hogan was only making sporadic appearances, almost saving him as sort of a special attraction and also making it not seem out of place that Hogan wasn't booked for the Bash at the Beach pay-per-view to begin with. And also, this did make things more shocking when he came down to the ring, only to be revealed as the third man and the leader of what was now the New World Order of Wrestling. Now, this was the biggest catalyst of the faction. While the invasion angle was great and was clearly borrowed from other sources, ending Hulkamania and turning wrestling superhero into wrestling supervillain was the big piece of the puzzle that turned the NWO into the sensation that it was always destined to be. Now, behind the scenes, Hogan was allegedly always the first choice. After all, if you're going to start a WWF invasion team, who better to lead it than the Hulkster? However, it has been said that Hogan was hesitant, not sure if he was really ready to turn on his fans by going heel. If he declined, the backup plan was supposedly for Sting to take its place. But Hogan, sensing that the good old days of Hulkamania were waning in lieu of the edgier style of the late 90s, and knowing just how monumental his turn would be, knew a good thing when he saw it, and he decided to join Hall and Nash. Furthermore, another possible reason for this turn was that the WWF had always maintained a certain understanding with Marvel Comics over the use of the name Hulk, whereas WCW never really made that same deal and had just been coasting by on Marvel not really saying anything about it. Oh, by the way, please subscribe to my other YouTube channel, Dave Knows Comics. So by turning Hulk heel, this gave them the opportunity to start calling him Hollywood Hogan instead, therefore keeping themselves off of Marvel's radar. And from there, the NWO reigned supreme, with a lot of early booking successes being credited to Kevin Sullivan, who was booking at the time. Those involved have mentioned that Sullivan was allegedly great at booking heat and really getting fans riled up. In conjunction with Eric Bischoff, other members of WCW management, and of course Hogan, Hall, and Nash, the NWO would become a destructive force, taking over all of World Championship Wrestling. The group would start coming down to the arena with aluminum baseball bats. They would devastate anyone who stood in their path, and most impressively, overlooking residents at nearby venues, would even call the police in real life, believing that thugs were legitimately beating up WCW wrestlers backstage. Hollywood Hogan would then win the WCW title later on that summer, and he would rename it the NWO title, and he renamed it with spray paint. Together with the Outsiders capturing Tag Team Gold, among other titles being captured by the faction, gaining new members, defeating WCW and the Horsemen at War Games, getting their initials advertised along with WCW's on pay-per-views, and even getting their very own pay-per-view with Sold Out, the New World Order easily became one of the greatest wrestling factions that ever lived. The New World Order's legacy would live on. The gimmick would be revived every now and again, appearing in both WCW during the Russo era and again in the WWE. The faction would also get an official Japanese chapter, and it would pay things forward with several NWO-inspired stables popping up, such as The Band in TNA or New Japan's Bullet Club. Now, there's a whole lot more behind this great faction, but that'll have to do for now. However, what do you think? What are some of your fondest memories of the early days of the NWO? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.
The preceding announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.